Thanks so much. We should just bring cake.
Would you like to stand?
No, I can hold stuff.
It doesn't go up high, but it's nice. It's a
What is that comedy?
Heckle and Jekyll.
Heckle and Jekyll.
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 Heckle and Jekyll.
Marion with an A?
Let's see. And what did I do with my glasses? Put them in the pocket. Just took my glasses off and lost them already.
Yes. Reach perfection.
I just took my glasses off and I've lost them. What?
Oh, I thought Mom would have fun with it.
You're looking for your glasses?
I've lost my glasses. I had them on when I came down and I haven't seen them since.
Oh, just sign.
Sign it and who knows what I'm signing.
I'll read it to you.
No, it's okay. I have another pair of glasses here, but the ones I was wearing have disappeared.
Oh, I hope they're not in the restaurant.
Okay. I have a big supply of glasses.
That's good.
Self-reproduced, otherwise used for No, I can't sign this. As long as they don't twist my words around.
There you go. We won't twist your words. We'll just keep it as is.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
You want my name and address and the whole thing, right?
Well, I can fill in the rest if you would just sign so we can start.
Okay, country, United States. And
Never know.
April, you want to run the camera?
You should have seen this.
it's
Thanks.
today's.
You're right to work.
You pulled the rope and you cut
Okay. That's all you
Thank you
need?
very much. That's all I need for now.
You only had to wait an hour for it. Oh, here, imagine that.
Imagine that. Just sign.
Did you see that? The paper was on top of it. I do this at home all day long, you know. Things disappear and they're right there.
So there I am, can't leave it out over her room.
Hello.
You mean you're onto the list? Yeah.
Man, Papa. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
This will be a nice, intimate evening. So, before we begin, are there any announcements? Can't think of any. There's a donation jar in the back. I do have some new books, so if you want to check them out, that's available for folks. So, sorry for the slightly late start, but without further ado, Ginny and Liz.
Yes.
Our good friends.
I have to find my notes. They're probably wet.
I'll start.
Okay.
Jay Baba, everyone. Actually, my sister should start the story. She found them. She found the notes.
Okay. Now, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Do I have to shout?
Speak up.
Okay. Wrong page. Okay. Well, back in the 50s, I had a great yearning to understand the secrets of life, and started looking in a lot of different places and reading about masters. And I had done some reading on different subjects and realized that I needed a master. I was living in New York City at the time, and I used to look in the subway. Perhaps I'd run into my master there, or on the street. All the things that I had read about, I realized that I had to have help for. I just couldn't do this by myself. I had to be God realized. So one day I was walking down Fifth Avenue, and I went by Brentano's bookstore. This was 1955. And I looked in the book in the window, and there was God Speaks. And I was really drawn to it and to the picture of Baba on the cover. And so I went in and bought the book and decided to take it home and read it. Well, it absolutely was mind-blowing to me. And I thought, this man is the only one I've read who has experienced this, and he's come down to our level to explain it to us all, to explain everything. Well, I took the book home, and I thought, I had such incredible awarenesses, I thought, reading the book, that I thought, well, I'll just sit home and read the book and become God realized. I mean, that's how mind-blowing the book was to me. Just a couple of weeks ago now, Don Stevens talked, and he was telling about what Baba had said, that when he wrote the book, he had told Don Stevens that every word that he dictated was, I want to get this correct, like an atomic spiritual bomb. And I thought, well, that's exactly what happened. I think my mind was blown by the words in the book. Well, I went back to Brentano's about a couple of weeks later to get the book to send to my friend down in Virginia, Keisha and Henry Kashouti. Now, I don't know if you know the Kashoutis, but I went to high school and college with Keisha, with the wife. And we had started on this spiritual search back in the early 50s. So I thought, well, they would like this book very much. So I went back to Brentano's and asked them, I looked in the window, the book wasn't there. I went in the store upstairs. It wasn't in the store upstairs, in the bookstore. And the man had to take me down to the basement and found that they had put it away in the cellar. So I got the book and I sent it to Keisha and Henry in 1955 in the fall as a Christmas present. Well, it turns out that Don Stevens says that these Baba had rushed the book through, and evidently a lot of people came to Baba through that book in 1955. So after I sent him the book, Henry was, well, he thought it hit him too as being incredible. But he wanted to meet Baba. He wanted to meet the master, whereas I was willing to sit home and read the book and become God realized. But he wrote to India and found out that Baba was coming to the Hotel Delmonico in 1956. So he wrote and he made arrangements so we could meet Baba. So Baba came, we met him at the Hotel Delmonico. Well, the interesting thing is when I did go up to meet Baba and was introduced to him, the first thing he said to me was, keep reading my books, you'll know eternal, keep reading my books and you'll know eternal bliss and joy. I also, reading the books, let's see, and Baba gave me a grape, and I left the room. You want to tell him? Then the second day, we found out that we could go back and see Baba again the next day at the hotel. You didn't have to have an appointment with him. So the next day,
Take it.
The next day I went in to meet Baba, and I went up to him, and when I went in, it was a long corridor we had to walk down, and I thought I saw lights like this on Baba because he was all lit up at the end of the room. And when I got to Baba, I realized it wasn't the lights at all. The light was coming from inside of his face. His face was just like a piece of alabaster that light was shining through. And I leaned over. I said to him, Baba just smiled and took my hand and patted it, and I said, I was here before. And Baba said, uh-huh. And I said, I was here yesterday. He said, uh-huh. I said, my name is Elizabeth Sacalis. And he said, uh-huh. And suddenly I leaned over and I kissed him on the cheek. And that's when I realized his skin was just like a soft persimmon. I don't know if you know what they feel like. And that's when I saw the light coming from inside of him. And at the moment that I kissed him, I realized that he was everyone that I had ever loved before in all of my life. And who knows how many other lives or what. But then I left seeing him, and I went around. It was a circle. You'd see him, and you'd come back into another room where there was Fred and Ella Winterfeld and Adele and Phyllis. And they had books on display and different things. And I saw the discourses. So I picked up the book, and remember the first day I met him, he said, "Keep reading my books and you'll know eternal bliss and joy." I picked up the discourse and opened it up to the page that said, I want to make sure I get it right. I opened the page and it said, "The spiritual life is not an escape from life." And that's what I was doing at home, sitting and reading. So I had read one book and then the next book, and it all crashed down on me. And I realized that I had been shy and running away from life. So I'll let my sister tell her story of the second day, my second day.
That's a great story. My sister had called me and told me that she met this wonderful master and made an appointment for me, and it was a Saturday. And in the meantime, this was July. In January, we had built a house without any money, moved in the worst of conditions because we didn't have any money, couldn't pay an extra month's rent, which was $60 in Manhattan. And I found a bird in the yard, and I had been really living the life of an abused person and didn't realize it, and I was really desperate. And I think I projected everything onto this bird, and for months I'd been trying to get it well. I bandaged it. I sent for worms from California, and the worms got loose in the basement, and life got, it was just this kind of unconscious suffering. You'd go through the paces all day long. But something was terribly wrong. And in the meantime, 3 years before, I also had some really incredible awakening experiences, because all of us had been discussing the teachings of the masters, and I had been looking and thinking, well, you'd find a master. But by the time my sister called and said this wonderful, wonderful master had come to New York and had made an appointment for me, I thought, she has got to be totally insane. You just don't, who was I to meet this master? But I did have friends in the Audubon, and they knew my predicament with this bird that had gone out for months, taping this poor thing, feeding it and trying to patch its broken bones. And it identified, you know what birds will do. They will identify with the first person they see, and I obviously am not a bird. So this creature just called out to me all the time and was suffering just as I was suffering. I never thought of my own pain, though. This was an example of all the suffering in the world to me at the time. And I had friends in the Audubon, and they said, why don't you go into New York? There's a bird man who knows what to do with sick birds. At that time, veterinarians did not care for pet birds and exotic animals as they do today. So in order to justify my trip into New York, really, this was a good reason, but certainly not chasing after someone from God knows where. I don't even think I knew he was from India. I asked my husband, who was really the problem in my life, if he wanted to come to meet this master and also take care of the bird problem. And he looked at me for a moment, and I could see he had that choice, and then he said, no, I think I'd better stay home. So I took my younger daughter, who is living in Myrtle Beach now, her name is Deirdre Eaton, and we proceeded to go into Manhattan, went to the Delmonico Hotel. I went upstairs, and I had the bird in a bird cage with all of his bandages on him and all the splints, and walked into this annex room. It wasn't the main room where Baba was. And Fred and Ella were there, and Phyllis and Adele. And Adele caught my eye. There was something there. And when she looked at the bird, she said, "Oh, please take the bird in. Baba loves creatures." I thought, well, that's pretty good, because I do. And I also looked at the discourses before I went in for my appointment. And my big theme, you've heard my sister's theme in her life. My theme was suffering. What is this suffering about? And the first thing I see in the discourses, I open it, and magic of all magic, it says that we are responsible for 95% of our suffering. This did not hit well with, it did not match my feelings of being a victim. So I turned, it was an L-shaped room, and I turned, and there were folding chairs like this, and I sat down with the bird and my daughter on my right, and we waited, and someone called and said, "Baba wants to see you now." Now, this is a bone of contention between my sister and me. I was a skeptic, a terrible skeptic. I was just going to pass through on my way to the Birdman. And as I turned the corner, I thought, what a cheap trick. They've got a light on him. And I looked like this. I was expecting Klieg lights. And afterward, I said, "No, I saw lights." And she said, "No, I saw the light. No, I saw the light." But I thought, this is ridiculous. It's so dramatic. And when I turned and looked at him, I realized the source of the light. And I think I started, I don't know where I was going, losing consciousness. The gross world disappeared. And I had come home. I didn't know those words exactly, but there was no barrier between him and me. It was my own self. It was the only time in my life I ever experienced this total peace. And then I hear this voice saying, oh, it was perfect. It was just a perfect moment. And it was perfect that he didn't speak. And I hear a voice saying, Baba wants you to have prasad, take a grape. And I'm going like, oh, who are you? And I was leaning over Baba, and I think I was really losing it. I remember the wall disappearing. Much of what was there was going away. And I leaned over to kiss him, and I thought to myself, anyone saw me kissing him would think, what is she doing kissing a stranger? And he was not a stranger. And I did take the prasad. Never saw Erich, not for one moment. Didn't see him, just Baba. It was pure love. It was a dimension that is just indescribable. It's the moment. It's the moment of your life. You can't describe it. And when I lifted from kissing him, I think I was almost going to pass out on top of him, and I'm not a delicate creature. So I pulled away, and I had the bird, and he looked at the bird, and you know, if you've seen films of Baba, he looks surprised and pleased, and I knew I didn't have to speak. And my silent question was, what is all this suffering about? And I did not expect an answer. I just gave him that question. And I think my daughter, yes, Dee Dee took a grape also, and we staggered out of there. We really did. And I sat down on a bench momentarily, and my sister was there ahead of me, and Henry and Keisha, and I must have been the last interviewee because Baba got up and they walked him to the elevator. And I sat there saying, I'll follow him to the ends of the earth. And I didn't even get up and follow him to Myrtle Beach. I just was stunned.
Or to the elevator.
Yeah, or to the elevator, or to anything. I just watched him leave. And I found that every time I was with him, I said the most stupid things over and over again. It was just totally irrational. I was better off when I didn't speak and thought, he can read my mind. It's better than my stepping into it again. You know, I was always putting my foot into it, I thought. And so he left. And I had to take the bird on a bus from Park Avenue up. I walked over to 3rd Avenue, took a bus up to the 90s, and went into this old tenement building, a basement store that was a shambles. And when I when I was on the bus, there were some people who recognized that the bird was a robin. And I would talk to the people on the bus about the bird being found in the yard and blah, blah, blah. So I walked into this shop, and this little old man in a broken accent said, "Wait, what kind of bird is that?" And I thought, I'm not going to get anywhere with this. I realized he really, I think, said that the bird's back was broken, so he was permanently paralyzed. And it dawned on me within the next few days that I had caused the suffering by prolonging his life. But in those days, I thought death was about the worst thing that could happen to you. And someone asked me, well, what was Baba's answer? Baba's answer unfolded gradually as I solved that problem. I had to have the bird destroyed. I had to realize that these answers unfold very, very slowly. And then we started getting information that Baba was going to come back to America.
I think that night I ran to the Winterfell's apartment for a meeting. And they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, dear, but we're packing to go to Myrtle Beach." And that's first we heard about Baba going on down in '56 down to Myrtle Beach. That's when we first heard about a center. So when we found out later that Baba was coming to Myrtle Beach again, we prepared for 2 years. He was coming down in '58, coming back to the U.S. and going to have a sahavas for his followers. In Myrtle Beach.
Oh, can I finish? I was going to get the punchline.
Oh.
Baba did tell me not to worry and to be happy. That flew right over my head. Being my favorite pastime is worry. So anyway, now my sister can take us to 1958 as we prepared for Baba to come back.
Okay. Oh, one of the other things I did notice in the note here, that one of the things I felt about Baba was that if I go to meet a master, I have read so much and I know so much now, he'll just touch me and I'll be God realized. It's just wonderful. So talk about delusions of grandeur. But then I realized that this was not going to happen and I was going to have to live my life, but I was going to have to do it with Baba. But it was such everything was a revelation, just almost like that with him. Things just clicked that you could probably go on a lifetime without him and not know these things. So anyway, for 2 years we prepared to go to Myrtle Beach, and we had been down to the center, and I'm capable or was capable of repairing things in those days. I did carpentry and plumbing and this, that, and the other thing, electronic stuff. And Kitty Davy heard about it, and she said, "We need a hi-fi set. We need some sort of music for Baba while we're down at the center." So I built a hi-fi system to take down there. So when we got down there, we took 2 people besides my sister and myself and her daughter Dee Dee. We took 2 people that we had gotten interested in Baba. They were people from the Vedanta Society, and they were friends of ours neighbors up in where we live. So we filled the car up and drove down to Myrtle Beach with them. And when we got there, I keep forgetting the point of things. I can't. Why was I born? Why am I living? Let's see. But one of the things that happened was this constant preparation, getting ready. I got so tired. Well, I did anyway. Was exhausted from trying to get down there and the driving and the preparations and building this and doing that and packing and taking people, that I realized that Baba always had people tired out so that when they got there, they were vulnerable and open. And then he could really work on us. Well, we got to Myrtle Beach and Baba wasn't seeing anybody yet, so we were, the 5 of us were staying in a motel across the road from the center. And we kept waiting to be called. Baba's going to see you now. You can come to the center. And we kept waiting. So one of our friends from the Vedanta Society liked to go to the beach. So we all traipsed over to the beach, and Olivia was her name. And she she asked, I used to go skiing a lot, and she wanted to know how I got this wonderful suntan. And I said, well, put Vaseline on, because we used to ski in the wintertime. And so Olivia got to the beach, and the sand is very fine there.
She put Vaseline
Vaseline
all over
on.
herself.
Yes, instead of suntan lotion or something. So Olivia was plastered with sand, and Baba wanted to see us. He called us. So they left a message at the motel, and we got there, and Olivia was in a hot steam shower, scraping the sand off with a knife. So anyway, that was our trying to get ready to go to the center. So we finally got to the center.
We were the first to sign in. It's in the guest book. It's wonderful. When you're getting old and you're losing your memory, you go there, and by God, you see that you had been there. And our names are there. My name first, my sister, and then my daughter's name. And every time I go there, I have to see this in Baba's house, that we were there. And so then we had the interview in the lagoon cabin.
Okay. When we got to the center, John Bass was screaming, "Where were you? Where were you? Where were you?" as only he could. And we went in and to see Baba. And the first thing we had a lot of trouble with my parents. Her mother and father, my mother and father, who were absolutely dead against Baba. He was a faker, he was this, he was that. My father was Greek, did not believe in anything like that from India. These are all fakers, you know. So they were very upset about that, and John said that they, I guess they had cabled or something. And we thought we had gotten down there without their knowing about it. Well, of course, didn't happen. So we had an interview with Baba. We went in with the two gals, with Olivia, and the other one from the Vedanta Society. That's her name was Johanna Schmidt. Great big tall blonde German woman who lived through Hitler's.
Actually, she was Jewish, married to a German man. It was ironic.
That's right. That's right. And she lived through Hitler's Germany.
Well, she was in Poland, and they hid out in the forests for winter after winter in Poland, and she had quite a life. And can I take it from here?
Yeah, I want to. Okay, you can do.
Yeah.
I do want to do the part. You can do the part about Mother and Daddy. I want to do the part about Johanna when she was interviewed by Baba.
That came later.
Yeah.
And the first thing, when John Bass read the cable out for my parents, Baba turned, and actually I felt he directed it to me, and he said, "Don't you think you're selfish coming down there to see him?" Because my mother had taken, we had no idea she was going to do this. She had some vein surgery, which is elective surgery. It wasn't anything serious. But in those days, people used all the advantages they could get for emotional blackmail. And we just didn't think she was going to do it, but she did it, and this was, the big drama in the family. We left my mother, and she had some varicose veins taken care of, and I knew that. I don't think my sister quite knew it. And so Baba points to me and says, "Don't you think you're selfish? Don't you see me in everyone? Is the timing right yet?"
Yes.
I heard this growl come out of me.
Well, that was after I opened my mouth. And
Yeah,
I felt very guilty that I was the youngest one. I left home. I remember I got out of college, and I just packed my bag and left them to face each other. And I left and thought that maybe I should go back and live with them. And
And you said that to Baba. Should I go back?
Should I go back and live with them? And I felt very guilty.
And I heard a chuckle.
He said,
his throat.
He said,
But I heard, it was a chuckle. He actually laughed at the proposition that she might go back home with this emotional blackmail. And when he said, "Don't you think you're selfish?" It was a growl. I was angry. I said, "No, you're the one." And it was a capital O-N-E. I never heard these words. I'm telling you, anytime I spoke to Baba, it came from I don't know where. And a lot of it was primitive. It really was. There was just no no understanding on my part of why I was saying anything. And I said no, and it was for money. I also didn't explain very much to Bob because I felt he understood. And I also said, and I think it's happened before, and of course it's always happened before, you can always be bought off. And then he said, I said for money.
Yes,
it was
he
for
was
money.
going to disinherit us.
Yeah, but I didn't even explain that to Bob.
Yes.
And he said, no, it's all right. And then you want to tell what happened to Johanna.
Then Johanna, the big strapping German woman, came in front of Baba, and Baba said, what do you know? She said something about Vedanta. He said, tell me all that you know about Vedanta. And Johanna started talking, and this stuff came out of the deep recesses, I don't know, blah, 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 blah. And she went on and on and on.
Stuff.
And then Baba took her hand like this, and he said, don't you know that all that matters is God and love for God? And Johanna fell down at his feet, and then she got up, and her hair went boing, 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 and her glasses were crooked, and she got up and she ran out the lagoon cabin door. But I love the,
Her hairpins fell out, and
yeah.
her hair fell down.
And the glasses crooked, it was what
It's like she loosened up. She just became free of all of this intellectualizing.
just like that, he,
And then he spoke to some others. Olivia was there.
yeah, well, Olivia was just, she was
quiet.
like a little elf or something, and that's the way Olivia was, and she was happy to be there, and then she left. But the sewing circle,
No, that was later.
much later.
That's later.
Well,
There
what-
was more going on there, and I just lost the train. Okay.
I don't remember anymore.
I guess we were dismissed, to say the least, and feeling pretty much as though this was the idiot contingency of all the people who were coming down there. It really didn't feel too bright, but a lot happened. And when we went out, we would sit and wait in front of the lagoon cabin, because you never knew when the loudspeaker wouldn't just suddenly come on blaring. It sounded like a railroad station. Baba wants to see, and then it would be a certain group or a certain person, so we would sit and wait and wait and wait. And yes.
How old were you at the time?
I was 28,
I was 31.
3 years old.
Yeah, and when I met him, it was 27, 28,
Yeah.
and you were 25.
But is there anything else, or should
I know I had something here. No, I guess not. The days went by waiting.
Well, this is still at the lagoon cabin. This is while we're standing around waiting
Yes.
and waiting to be called. One day I was sitting out there, and up until then I had assumed that there was a God, but this was intellectual. And as I sat there, I saw these rays coming out of the lagoon cabin. They were like electronic circuits or something coming out. And I thought, my God, there is a God. And I thought,
Thing was true.
it was scary. Actually, Baba had his flag out there, and I wanted to get up and tear the flag down. It was really scary to realize there is a God. Everything else until then had just been, just intellectual conjecture, and like a kid reading stories or something. And my words were, whoa, there is a God. And I spent a lot of the time after that hiding behind trees.
Yeah, in the meantime, I was involved. I like to sew, and I was involved. Someone called me. It had to be Adele. She always had me sewing stuff for her. And she said, we're making things for Baba. Now, there were orders that we not bring Baba any gifts, but somehow this was the Blessed Sewing Circle, so it had to be legal, or what was in my mind, I do not know. So I bought a new sewing machine with all the embroidery stuff in those days. That was my reason for buying. I always had an excuse for something. I had to have an excuse to go into New York. I had an excuse to buy a sewing machine, so it was for something else. And so I bought a sewing machine. I was making these hankies and things for Baba, and they were not pretty, to say the least. I'm not a seamstress. But I did bundle this up, and I had them with me, and we were told that Baba would be calling the sewing circle in. And I told you that we had orders not to bring gifts, but I could compartmentalize my mind, and I did. This was over here, and the sewing circle was here, and I was so happy to have a sewing machine. And so we walk in, I had this package in my hand, and the moment I stepped in, I remembered the order. And I really, I was terrified. It was the Hound of Heaven. I was caught. I was trapped in this cabin with him. And I turned, and there's a corner. Every time I go in the lagoon cabin, I see that corner where I went face to the wall with this package and thinking, it was jig as the cops, I've been found out. I was found out for everything I'd ever done. It was revealed to me, my excuses. And when I turned, Baba was smiling at me, and he took the package. What could I say? What happened with him was so instantaneous that buried facets of your personality would come out, and in 10, not even 30 seconds, in 10 seconds, it's as though he had a big eraser. It was just gone. You were projected right in front of your face as a screen. It was amazing. But that moment of fear that there was no place to go in the universe, and Liz experienced this in another way. But I think we both realized not only was he the most wonderful, loving person to be with, but this was something we also don't. It must be the tiger in the cage that Baba spoke of. You love to admire the tiger and all, but will you get in the cage with the tiger? And some of those moments we were in the cage with him.
Okay. We spent a lot of time in the barn. Baba gave discourses or talked to us, or we played music. I played music on the hi-fi, which I carried from one place to the other at the center. And one of the records I played was a record of Maria Lanza singing Begin the Begin. I could not find another record of Begin the Begin. So Baba listened to it, and he said, I don't like his voice. Can I tell you that within 3 weeks after leaving the center, Maria Lanza died? Do you think that meant anything? And then I went and hid behind another tree.
That's funny.
Yes, I'd forgotten about that. But
we also brought some of the strangest records you would ever imagine. Do you think, knowing the stories about Baba, that he would like to have sat through 3 hours of Bach's St. John Passion, or crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. There was baggage we brought along, and the moment we unloaded, I remember Liz's car opening the trunk.
In his house.
I don't remember where it was, but we opened the trunk, and there was this obscene stuff. Yes. Where the really good stuff was music from The King and I, was light music, and it was certainly not this heavy hours and hours of classical music.
What I did was we went to Baba's house and set up the phonograph with a phonograph, you know, with the old turntables, you could stack them, and stacked up all this terrible music on it. And one day we went back to Baba's house and saw this stuff. We grabbed it and ran. We knew it was not appropriate. Just like that, we learned it was not appropriate and put it back into the car. Yeah. But this was in Baba's house that we did this.
I don't remember.
Oh, I remember it.
I remember the thing being in the barn and then playing music. Baba loved to hear the music in the barn.
That was not bad music.
Yeah. No, that was the good music. And there were people who brought along spirituals and
Marian Anderson
and who else? Some of the younger women, not the classical singers, but ones who sang Negro spirituals, they called them at the time. And I think Beryl had a lot to do with it. But there was a Joe Blake there too that Elizabeth Patterson had hired to mind the children. And he'd been with Red Book magazine, and we had just gotten over the McCarthy era. The man was one of these, probably accused of being a communist. He was not, but he needed a job, and Elizabeth gave him a job tending the children in the playground behind the compound. Between the compound and the barn, the playground is still there. And Joe Blake was watching us one day after another, and he said at one point that he'd never seen anything, very sophisticated man, editor of a famous magazine, and he had never seen anything like it. And I remember one day where suddenly he burst into tears, and he was another one who ran into the woods and was convinced of who Baba was. So much happened.
I had a thought.
Oh, one day we went out to the beach, and you carried Baba in the chair. I think he went out in the car, and then we had the chair at the beach. Do you remember that in 58?
58. This is all 58. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Baba had the dancers, the male dancers, put the chair down, and he said, "I want the women to carry me." Well, I found myself on the lower left-hand side. The chair was not even. It wasn't a straight pole through it.
No, that was Dr. Kenmore's chair.
That was a
They were
brilliant
like that.
design. It was just like that. So someone in back had to pick it up at a higher spot or be taller, and someone in front. On my right, I don't think, it was Gladys. What's her name, from California?
Yeah, from the center there.
Yeah, from Ojai. Behind me was...
You mean Agnes?
Agnes, thank you. And there's nothing like...
Agnes Barron.
Agnes Barron. And behind me was Jane Haynes, who was much taller. And there was a fourth woman, and I was short, at the short stick. And as we had the instruction to pick up the chair, the tall women really heaved it, and Baba started forward like this. I threw my, oh look, this is brilliant. I threw my arm around his knees, and I had fooled around in college and thought I'd broken my elbow doing the same thing, and I thought, okay, here I go. And I said to him, and I have to go through eternity with these words, "Don't worry, Baba, I'll save you. We American women are strong." And I hear Billy Eaton yelling, "Now what are you doing?
Now
what are you
what are you
up
up
to?"
to, Baba?
To Baba. And what happened was, I mean, he pitched forward. He was totally off the seat, and he was as light as a feather. It changed all the time, didn't it? Sometimes he weighed 2,000 pounds, and other times no weight at all. And he was going like this, pretending he was frightened. But I have to remember that I offered to save, yes. And why? He had the women pick, I don't know. But I really did not mean that. American women are strong. I just thought of how big we were. We really were big and muscular compared to the, little, they're so lovely and they're so fragile, but it sounded so, it's a word, nationalistic. I didn't mean it that way, no. And then when I said it, I realized, my God, it was just like, what's the word for
volunteering.
it? Volunteering in the Army. What the hell did I say we were strong for? What else are you going to, but you're going to be used for being strong. It was just, I realized I really was in trouble for saying that. Never say you're strong. Say, I'm really very weak. Stupid, a lot of things. But I think he laughed. He got some laughs from us.
Baba always laughed. Everything I ever said, he laughed.
Yeah, he laughed.
Which was all right. And even though, and then I'd run off and hide behind a tree. But Baba gave lots of very interesting talks, and one of them, he took Jane Haynes' hat, and he discussed something with Beryl, and it was about changing our perspective. He said, somebody asked him, Baba, do you change our lives? And Baba said, no. He said, I don't change your lives, I change your perspective. I change the way you look at life. He says, he took her hat and he said, I turned it around so you see things from a different direction.
Yeah, there was one night when there were thunderstorms, and for some reason or other I was thinking, oh, Baba's out working, and I haven't read too much about what masters do for work or anything, and I thought he's working in the thunderstorm. And I couldn't sleep, and the next day in the barn he wanted to know if anyone had anything to say, and he pointed to me. And I had to say, I think you were out working in the thunderstorm. And he said it was like, oh, good. But it was Simpson stuff. It was really it was easy. He didn't ask me anything about quantum physics. We went in for gifts for Baba one day at his house. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes. I have my gift right here somewhere. I was wearing it. I took it off because of the mic. Bang, bang.
What did you get?
A pin with his picture that Mani and Meher had sent.
Yeah, the women went in for gifts, and then the
I
men.
remember that.
You remember?
With envy, still.
I still have
That's
the
why
pin.
mine's in a
Get
safe
one.
deposit box. But my daughter and I walked in, and she put her hand out, and you know the little glass bracelets in those days, they weren't plastic. And this bracelet was much smaller than her hand or her wrist. And from here to there, I could see nothing. He got this bracelet on, just like, psst. And when it came my turn, I thought he had his arms around me. I felt totally wrapped in his arms. And actually, I had his hands in my hand and squeezed his hand, and I had this, like a tie pin with his picture. And to this day, I don't know if I stuck him or what happened, but it was as though I never really knew what was going on when I was with him. I didn't know if his hands were, you know, if I was standing up or standing on my head. It was as though I just totally lost all sense of balance, anything. And so that was strange because he jumped when I squeezed his hand, and I'm still wondering if I squeezed the pin. So I got a pin, and my daughter got this tiny bracelet. We went back to the motel, and I didn't want her to break the bracelet and lose it. And so we worked for an hour to try to get this bracelet off, where he just got it on. And actually, there were many times when we saw things very different from what you'd expect. The birthday party.
Well, yeah, let me tell you,
Yeah.
more in the barn still.
Oh, you're still in the bar. Oh,
Yeah,
we can go back and forth,
yeah, we can go
did,
back and
yeah.
forth, but one more thing I wanted to say before I forget. Harry Kenmore, Dr. Harry Kenmore, used to recite the Oparvarta Gar all the time, and he was very good at it. And we were in the barn, and Harry was standing in front of Baba. Baba wasn't back to him. Harry is blind, and also Baba isn't back of him. Harry started to say the Oparvarta Gar, and Baba said, "Did you forget? Did you forget, Harry?" And right in the middle of it, Harry totally forgot was it the Master's Prayer?
Yeah.
The Master's Prayer. It was the first line of Oparvarta Gar?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm not talking about. Oh, anyway, speaking of forgetting. So Harry, right in the middle of it, who was very good at saying it, completely got lost right in the middle of it. And Baba, a second before he stopped, went, "Did you forget, Harry? Did you forget?" Anything else?
No, what was I starting on? Back at the...
You went the birthday party, the children's birthday party?
Not yet.
Okay, you.
We were there and thought we would never leave. We had died and gone to heaven, and this could be our lives forever, being with Baba and being on the center and standing in line for these little meals from Kitty. And it was just such paradise. And we went on and on like that. And suddenly, we get this information. Tonight, Baba said you can all go out to have dinner in a restaurant. And we broke out of there like people who'd been in prison for 20 years. And we got to the restaurant, and we, tablecloths, salt and pepper. Oh, they gave us forks.
Music.
And music. And it was just, he knew exactly. We thought we could take it. But can you imagine living with him in ashram all those years? I mean, if you got just close to what intensity this was. And then one day in the barn, we'll go back to the barn. We can shift back and forth because we did. Some days would be at his house or at the barn or at the lagoon cabin or standing in line for meals. And
Faye Fisher?
Faye
Fisher. Should I tell my?
Fisher.
I'll
You
tell
tell your part
the beginning
first.
of the story.
What she saw in 1958.
In 1958, Bob used to have periods of rest. You know, we'd all be there. He didn't get up because he would He would have to be lifted up and everything. This was after his car accident. Where was I?
Intermission.
Yes, intermission is the word. We had an intermission, and Baba was sitting there, and there's a woman in front of him named Faye Fisher. She was sitting on the floor, and she had her legs with her skirt spread out like this, and Baba had a little flower in his hand. And he had the flower, and he was twirling it and twirling it and twirling it and twirling like that, and threw it, and it landed in her lap. And I often thought, I wonder what that was all about.
Now we will proceed 20-some years later, 30 years later, and there was a Northeast gathering in Massachusetts, and I decided suddenly to race up there because Wendy was speaking, and I couldn't spend the weekend. So I don't know if you know where it's a children's camp, and they had this dining room, and I went in to have lunch before Wendy spoke, and there's Faye, and we got together and we were talking, and she said to me, you know, Ginny, I have to ask you something I've been very concerned about. Years ago when I first met Baba, I asked him to please make my life easy. And
I forgot.
you forgot the punchline.
Because when I went out of the barn after Baba had played with his flower, which landed in her lap, I found one of the little flowers there, and I picked it up and I started to twirl it. It was full of thistles, and it stung. And Baba had been twirling it.
And then I connected the two because my sister said, why'd he do that? He took all the thistles off the flower. And so when Faye said this to me 25 years later, 30 years later, I don't remember when it was, I was able to tell her what he had done, because she remembered his throwing the flower in her lap, but didn't connect asking him to make her life easier. And when I told her that my sister tried that and it really was painful, he took the pain in taking the thistles off the flower. And there were moments like that. There are so many. Dr. Morty was talking about dreams. I had a dream once that I was crawling on the Merritt Parkway. Why to Boston, I'll never know. And that was right when I had met Baba. And I'm crawling and crawling and crawling, and I get to this, will look like a church or something with marble floors, and there are these bare feet in front of me. And I look up, and it's Baba standing there with his hands on his hips, and all he says to me is, why are you crawling? And this was such a revelation as to why I was crawling. Years later, I met a young woman who was sobbing. She was at the center, and when she started to leave her cabin, she couldn't walk, and she started to crawl. And she was crawling towards me. And she had had a crisis of some kind, and it turned out she was from Boston. That answered my Boston thing. But it was these small connections that may seem like nothing, but I was able to sit and talk to her and say, that because Baba was in my life, I was touched by what was happening to her, that we were so connected, and that her problems were similar to the ones I had as a woman, as a mother, as a wife. And it was an amazing situation. But it's that opening that we receive from Baba. All different degrees maybe, and different according to our personalities.
The connections and the links between us all.
Can I tell about the movie?
Which movie?
We were going
okay.
to Jane's Theater at one of these, like the Brotherhood of the
Eagles,
Elks, or the Elks and stuff. And in those days there wasn't too much air conditioning, and Baba warned us ahead of time. It seemed very serious. I don't want you to fall asleep. And this was almost like the Garden at Gethsemane, and we weren't going to fall asleep. I took it very seriously. I really thought he was asking of us something very important. So we get to the theater, and it was a long, narrow shoebox from what I remember, and a flat roof with the South Carolina sun beating down on it. And there's Baba sitting in front of me, and his head and ears and his braid were magical. it swept you through time and space as nothing else could. And it was 400 degrees. I am exaggerating, but it was the hottest I had ever been. We were baking, and we were waiting for the film to start. And we had this order, do not fall asleep. And I was so involved with the importance of obeying him, which I couldn't eat. I mean, if he asked me for a glass of water, I still would be looking for it, so forget it. But I was into some kind of importance that only the mandali had. And the film starts, and it was Charmian Deuce's film, and she starts on the beach with the tide coming in and tide going out, and the tide coming in and the tide going out. I mean, there was 10, 15 minutes of this with Meher Baba written on the sand, and the water would come in, and I was going, whoops, don't fall asleep, don't fall asleep. And it was the end of the world if you fell asleep. This is so typical. You can't even do one little thing for your beloved. It was so terrible. I saw the humor of it later, because this was his way of telling us, this film is going to take a lot to watch.
Well, it was unedited.
Do you remember? It was unedited ad infinitum. It went on.
Well, they've cut it now.
Yes.
What have they?
Roughly. I don't remember the rest of it. I think I must.
3 times that long.
Yes.
Okay.
You're right. And you forgot the music.
What was the music?
I'm trying. It was Strauss.
Oh no.
But anyway.
A waltz?
Again,
Might as well have been. Oh God.
Okay.
A lullaby could have been.
All right. You okay? Can I go
I'm
on?
not. When I remember how stupid I am and was. Go ahead.
Okay. Baba had a birthday party for the children, an unbirthday party. It was nobody's birthday in particular, but he had a party for the children. And it was outdoors, and it was a long picnic table between. I had my movie camera. I was taking pictures of Baba. I have pictures of the whole thing. But Baba was throwing prasad to different people. And in the movie, there's a picture of Beryl standing right behind him, and he looked like he's going to throw it to her, and she went like this, and he'd throw it that way. He was very tricky when he threw the prasad. But he had me play. I had the hi-fi out there, and I had the King and I played it. I played it once, the March of the Siamese Children, and whatever else was on. And I played it, and I thought, well, this is getting boring. I'm playing it over and over again. And I sent somebody over to see if he wanted me to put something else on. No, he wanted me to keep playing it. So I kept playing it, and in my movie, I've used that as a background. The March of the Siamese Children and other parts of The King and I. But years ago, I was watching Arts and Entertainment on television, and the woman, I can't remember her name now, who wrote the book for The King and I, was born in Ahmednagar. Oh, yes, there was a whole program about it.
Yes.
Yep, she was born in Ahmednagar.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Hello? Talk about connections. Anyway, Baba was throwing the prasad, and I thought, I did a lot in sports when I was in high school and college, and afterwards even. And I thought, oh, if Baba would only throw me a piece of candy, I could catch it in midair or something,
Be the best.
Yes, I'd be the best at it, and I'm sitting at the end of the picnic table, and one comes, right on I was the only one there, and right in front of me it stopped. And that was it, so I got my prasad.
Actually, I watched it, and it was one of those wrapper things, and it walked, tormenting her. I watched.
Yeah, but all these
moments, though, were so self-revealing. And that was the time when I really wanted permission from him to take photographs at that party. And when I mentally sent a message saying, would it be all right for me to take photographs? And he started fading out like the Cheshire Cat. He just, what do they call these
Hologram.
Hologram. The hologram started to change. And I don't do things like that. I really don't. And then he looked at me and smiled. It was like, yeah, did you like that? To go ahead, take a picture. But there was always this feeling with him that you were the only one and that there was something going on, and it happened with everyone there. Everyone, all the time. In the barn, he forgave us. And someone asked, I think it was Lenny
Willoughby.
Lenny asked to please repeat it, and Baba looked upset. And another time we were in the midst of music and discourses, and this woman asked, does this have anything to do with the Pentecost? And Baba looked disappointed, looked upset. And I mean, my feeling was that he wasn't a reference to anything. This was unique. This had nothing to do with the past. It was a new dispensation. It was the past and everything, but not to always connect it with something past, to be in the now with him and what he was doing. These were moments with him.
Okay. Another thing Baba talked about was getting God realization. He talked about if you want God realization, it's very, very difficult. He said you have to go against your nature. If you want to sleep, then you mustn't sleep. If you're hungry, you mustn't eat. If you are full, you must eat. And so it's very, very difficult. So he said, what is the solution to this? And he says, all you have to do is think of me in everything you do. That is the solution to going against your nature. So we can be as natural and disgusting as we want to be.
And then there was the comedy show.
Yes.
The burlesque show.
Yes.
And of course the dancers. I love when you tell the story of doing the dance. But when the men put on a burlesque show, some people were a little shocked. I know one of the ladies said, well, this isn't very nice. But it was absolutely wonderful. And they did baby carriage with, who was in the baby carriage? Florsheim.
No,
they-
Dana Field.
Dana Field was in the baby carriage. And then these veils of sanskaras being pulled out of someone
And
else.
balloons.
And balloons.
Bursting the balloons that were
Real
supposed to be sanskaras.
sanskaras. And then we left the barn, and everyone sat around.
That was
That was after
that was
the
afterwards,
comedy show.
and the
yeah, we were
and
all
the French.
laughing, and everyone was having a wonderful time. And suddenly we move outside, and Baba sits and goes into his universal work. And it was from black to white, or white to black. It was, the contrast was so incredible of this extreme comedy and this very serious. He left us. He was there physically, but he left us. And everyone was very calm. But one lady really lost it and was very upset and said, I know what he wants, I know what he wants. And I thought, I don't know what he wants.
And her husband slapped her to bring her around or something.
Yeah, she was hysterical.
Yeah.
She was hysterical. And this went on for quite a while, and later it was explained that he was doing his universal work, and we shared in it.
He just wasn't there. The body was there, but he just wasn't there. He didn't cover his head or anything like it. I guess he did sometimes, I hear. But that's when Joe Blake thought...
But that's when the fellow who was hired by Elizabeth, Joe Blake, said he had been, he really was a very sophisticated, well-traveled man. He said he never saw anything like it, that no one lost it, everyone there sat there, because it was really a frightening moment. And whatever goes through your mind, you have absolutely no way of explaining it to yourself from any of your training or education or life's experience. This is something totally new.
Of course, Baba had his bad hip after the automobile accident. So he had to be carried in the chair, or he had to hold on to people as he walked. Well, he was going back to the lagoon cabin one day, and the people had made a path for him to the door of the lagoon cabin, And I looked down, and there was a rose bush right in his path. And I thought, with his sadra and just sandals on, he's going to get scratched by that. And I was looking at it, and I felt his pat on my cheek. But I looked up, and I have a picture, which you were carrying.
And I'll tell my story before I pass the
Yes.
picture, because this was simultaneous almost.
Okay. He patted my cheek, and then by the time I looked up, he had gone, and the rose bush was shaking. He had walked right through it.
But you didn't see any pull or any scratching or anything?
No, I think he floated over it or something, but it was...
I don't know. It was just these strange moments, how matter changes, like the bracelet or the picture. And what happened to me was, I was thinking, oh, Baba, he told us before that he was going to show us how he could walk after the accident without being, he was in the chair the rest of the time. And as he was coming towards us, my sister had this first experience with the rose bush. Mine was, I thought to myself, oh, Baba, you don't have to do this, have the pain of walking just to show us you can do it. Absolutely the exact words, you don't have to do this. And through Erich, he said, the bliss, you don't know the bliss. And really, for a split second, I thought I'd been fooled. I felt really strange. But he lived parallel with the bliss and the pain. And so he wanted me to know that he was in bliss.
Do you want to get the picture out?
And
We
this
can
is a
stand it
picture
up
of
here.
that moment, which is really wonderful for us. My sister is in front,
Okay.
and pass it around.
Pass it around. Start over there.
With all that greasy
That's
little fingers.
the three heads together, myself and Ginny in the middle, and then Baba.
Liz and that's Ginny. And I'm over there.
Yeah, it's a wonderful picture. We're lucky it was.
So I don't know who
There
took
were
it.
special moments.
Who took it, you know?
always.
I have no idea.
I don't
Isn't
know.
that
I don't know. I don't remember.
So somebody else was there.
That was right when it happened.
Yes, I don't know. Someone who was taking pictures all the time and then sent us this one, or it was in the. It could have been in someone else's possession, and they gave it to Hermes when he made pictures, because he made copies for us.
That was right when that incident happened?
Yeah.
This happened.
Yeah.
As soon as he
Just
was finished, he just finished patting me on the cheek, and I was...
You look blissed out.
It's
It was strange.
Picture.
The last day at the barn.
I don't remember anything else. I have nothing else. That's it, except for the airport.
last day at the barn, let me make sure I get it straight. He really said to us several times that he didn't like the discourses. He didn't want to go into them. He would rather listen to music, and we would sit and listen. And it was so extraordinary, because you could hear the birds, you could hear the surf, and to hear some of these songs and spirituals with Baba, just quietly enjoying them all together. And so when he said the discourses gave him a headache, and I think it's important to read them, but at the very end, when he said goodbye to us in the barn before we went to the airport to say goodbye, he said, I just want to get this right. The last day in the barn, go into the world, live, love, fight. That surprised me.
Yeah.
That really, it was just as though someone threw cold water on me. Fight, live, love, fight. Be yourself, be natural. And as my sister reminded me, he finished by saying, remember.
But always remember to keep me in the back of your mind.
No,
What?
always keep in the back of your mind
That all of this is
bad,
Baba's.
is Baba's.
Okay. That all of this.
All this is Baba's. And then one other comment he made that's really stuck out.
Outside.
And he said that guilt, feeling guilt was not good. He didn't say conscience. He said guilt. And Actually, that turned it around for me, because the very first experience with him in the lagoon cabin in '58 was, don't you think you're selfish? Don't you see me and everyone? I said no. In other words, I didn't feel guilt. And for days I spoke to Beryl and I said, should I have said that? I didn't feel guilty. And he said, she understood more than I did, and she said, no, you are not to feel guilty. And he also had announced in the barn that anyone who had business and their mind on anything else, anywhere else, should leave right then and there. That you were to be with him 100% in Sahavas as a family.
That's why I was so surprised when John Brass brought up the subject of my family, my mother and father, because I had no intention, I wasn't even thinking about them. And yet he brought it up because things were going on that we didn't know.
But Baba later straightened that out in our minds, if there was any question as to how he wanted it.
But always things got tied together, and things are still being tied together. Like Don Stevens talking about the atomic spiritual bombs at Bali, and I remember how God affected me. Mm-hmm. It absolutely blew me away.
I love questions and answers. That I like the best.
Well, one more thing.
Oh.
When we went to the airport,
oh yes,
we all sat around at Baba's feet waiting. You know, he had time before his plane. And he said, I never come and I never go. And I'm sure other things were said, but I remember that very, very distinctly.
This is in South Carolina?
This was in South Carolina.
Wilmington, North Carolina.
Yeah, that's right, the airport. We all got on buses and cars and went up to the airport to see him off. And we were sitting in the lobby, sitting around waiting.
Oh, another time, Baba suddenly pointed to me and said, what do you do? And at that time, I was thinking of Ann Conlon. She had been visiting my house, and I was talking to her about Baba, but she was raised a Catholic and went to Catholic school, and I was afraid to come out and say who she was. My sister finally said who he was, and my sister finally said, oh, he's the Christ. And she accepted it. And here I'd been fooling around for months.
Actually,
years.
she almost fell over.
Yeah, well, she didn't hit you. In those days, people were much more reserved. And so when he said, what do you do? I was thinking of Anne. And another answer that came from God knows where, I said, I fish. And I didn't say, I'm thinking about this lady at home and I wonder if she'll come to you. All I said was, I fish. And in my mind was the whole picture of Anne at the table, how I knew she was one of his. And she wasn't sure about coming down. She went down there a few weeks later. She went down after he left and went back to India. And then, of course, you know her story about going to India all alone. I mean,
for a
practically
weekend.
Had more than that.
5 minutes?
It was supposed to be, and it ended up much more. So
tell us this story.
about Anne?
Yeah.
Oh, you've got to get it from Anne. I'm sure there are tapes of Anne telling it. Do you have time?
Yeah, we have a plan.
My sister might remember the details better. But suddenly there was an opening, a weekend.
We had been waiting. Baba was in seclusion. Baba wasn't seeing anybody. And Anne was dying because we had introduced her to this man, you know, Baba. I mean,
Came back with stories about Myrtle Beach.
yes, and I took her down to Myrtle Beach after the 58 Sahavas, and the center was empty. Nobody else was there, and Kitty, then they were living in Myrtle Beach. Kitty had to come and stay on the center and have somebody living there. So it was just Kitty and Ann Conlon and I. And so she got a good introduction to Baba down there, too.
Always private interviews.
But she kept hearing about Baba, and by the time it was time for her to go to see Baba, she was really desperate. And there was no openings until this one little message came in at a Monday night meeting. It said, people can come for 1 hour only. So we got...
This weekend,
You mostly got the papers and the...
the money, the Passport at Rockefeller Center, Air India on Fifth Avenue. We ran. It was September that she went? Was it in the
I don't remember what time of year.
It was hot,
61.
I remember, and we ran and ran and ran. And at the passport office, of course, her job said, of course you can go. And it was the Maharani of Baroda, of course. And that, it was better telling that to people than the avatar. They understood that, the power thing and the princess. So when we went to the passport office, and she was a journalist and had papers, ID for journalism, and the good old US government gave her a passport right away. And she was off on the next, I think it was a matter of a day. Do you remember how many days it took? She should remember. But it's a wonderful story. And then we did scrape together enough money for
Yes,
the tickets.
between the two of us,
Tickets
yes.
were very expensive.
$1,500 for the flight, and that was a lot of money in those days.
Yes.
And we split it. Yeah. But I remember,
The twins tell a different part of the story.
yes, they went
The
about the same
clothing
time.
and
Yeah.
the dressing up.
Yeah, and they stayed. It was supposed to have been a weekend. People couldn't believe at the passport office or at the airline that it was just going to be for a weekend. But of course, Baba kept them there for a week at least.
Was this a new jet, or was it a prop plane? Because we got out, it wasn't Kennedy then. It wasn't called Kennedy Airport. It was Idlewild.
Might have been a Viscount then. I'm not sure.
No, they didn't have them then. They blew up in the 50s, the Viscounts. They imploded.
In '62, we went on a big
And
regular jet. Yes.
It was a jet. And
Yeah.
I think it was one of the first jets, and we stood on the roof. You could watch the planes take off. And I thought, my God, the Avatar has made it so that planes were invented for his manifestation. Everything was so clear that people could see him and he could travel around the world. It just seemed so obvious that everything was just symbiotic relationships all around. And she got there, and you know her story. Any questions, please?
When you got back from 1958, were there any repercussions with your family?
Terrible. It didn't stop.
And Conlon and I had to go see detectives. They turned our name into the police in New York City, and we had to go see detectives there and just tell all about Baba. And Ann Conlon being a newspaper reporter, and our parents kept saying that all Baba wanted was our money.
Or that they were communists. That was the big communist.
That was another
Now I
thing.
guess I don't know what you'd be.
Yeah.
There's
But,
always something.
Terrorists.
Yeah, terrorists.
But
There always has to be
Yeah.
some enemy out there.
But the detectives had to apologize and said that they had to investigate everything that came
And
in.
my father
and
wrote to the
there was
State-
nothing.
Yeah, State Department. But you know, the more we read, and it was very painful for us. I tell you, it was a nightmare, because when you hear other families, and the parents were reasonable, and I remember Viola saying her parents met Baba and were so impressed, and here we sit with this cucaracha family. That's all I could say. And then, you know, in some way, reading between the lines, you realize that he did Baba's work, contacted the State Department, people knew all about Baba, and what can I say?
I got the reports when they died. They have all the reports, and they couldn't find anything. As a matter of fact, Henry Khashoggi was called in to see somebody at the FBI, and Henry was a lawyer then. Now he's a judge, but he was sitting there, and the FBI man opened the drawer and he pulled out a picture. He says, "You mean this man had a picture of Baba?" And put it back. I mean, there was nothing.
I understand I'm sure our government knows everything about Baba, and some higher ups have read his stuff. So. But there were years of really realizing after the McCarthy era and the way, you know, the average American not exposed to too much stuff could get very angry if they saw his picture or knew you were involved with something foreign.
One day we were down in Virginia. My parents still lived down there, and we were in the kitchen, and my parents had gone out, and my sister and I were sitting at the kitchen table, and we had pictures of Baba there. They were just about this big. And apparently one of them came back in the house, and we heard them. We dropped the picture in the toaster. We didn't have to push it down. It just went down and disappeared.
What could you do? And then, you know, when you saw they had Baba's books and they misunderstood everything that was written, they just weren't, especially my father, English is second language. He didn't understand much of what he was reading. So, what can I say? They're probably right with him now. Just that antagonism,
Yeah.
you know, is stronger than love.
Yeah,
It can be stronger.
Yeah, I thought that they're probably there already. Very immediate.
Muddling
They thought-
along like
they
this for
thought-
thousands of lifetimes.
I used to have to force myself sometimes. You know, I'd be carried away with something. I force myself to focus on Baba and think about Baba. They couldn't escape it. They thought of him all the time. They did. It was really gnawing at them.
Bad breath is better than no breath.
Yes.
Anyway, folks, that's about it.
The woman who had her the flower tossed by Baba onto her lap was, you know, Baba was playing. You said it was to make her life easier.
Yes,
You said 25
it
years
was.
later.
It was an absolutely,
Flatline life.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
She
Faye,
she
did
lived
you know Faye?
Faye
You knew
Fisher.
Faye?
She lived in New York. She had an apartment. She was an older
She
woman,
went to
and nothing
meetings and she went here and there.
nothing much happened. She just plodded along.
Photographs of our meetings. I just ran into a picture of Faye today. I didn't bring. But she had a totally, it would not be something, I would ask for an exciting life, and you know, and I did have one, but I would never think of asking that. We are so different, it's incredible. When you were together with a large group like that, day in and day out, there were things that happened. For instance, someone would have gotten personal advice from Baba, and that person might come out and announce that this was for everyone. And everyone was so different. You could say exactly the opposite from one person to another, and that would be spiritually correct for them.
Before I turned around and had my spiritual life, I went to art school. I went to the Art Students League here in New York, and I studied under a master painter. And I learned, his name was Robert Brackman. If you wanted to learn how to paint, he was who you studied with. And I learned that you listened to everything he said, and you did what he said. And you could learn just like that very quickly. And that's where I first got the idea of going to a master.
And also what he told, what any master would, a good one would do, was tell what's
Yeah.
individual for each student.
Yes, he'd go up to one person's canvas and say, loosen up. He'd go to the next one over, tighten up. This one used more color, this one used less color. And it was an individual thing because he was so good as a teacher. And that's just the way Baba was.
But this is what's so dangerous about someone just generalizing that Baba said this to do or that to do. It's really every person has this direct line to him. No interference, please. So.
You mentioned in the beginning of your narration that you were in a lot of upset, like in your life,
Yes.
and everything. Did you find, as the years have gone on, times where you have again kind of lost your equilibrium and not finding, you know, your source within and Baba within?
Always
and then,
the challenge, being pushed always to the edge. There's always something coming up. You can't escape it.
yeah, I guess I was
You
just wondering,
can't
'cause that's so
escape it.
individual.
Yeah.
I
But you
was
can get
wondering
more
about your
answers
life.
towards suffering, and this 95% of your suffering. And finally something happened to me at the center once where, I don't know, it sounds corny, but everything's been perfect the way it was. Everything is perfect. Of course, one could say it can't be any other way because that's the way it was. But I feel as though everything happened perfectly, even the worst.
What was it like going to India in '62?
My sister went. I didn't go.
What?
Going
the
to India in
62?
62.
One of the things that really stands out in my mind about that was we were sitting around in this huge area, you know, with a tarp over. And there was a soldier that came in. There were lines of people at Guru Prasad all the way out to, not Guru Prasad, at Pune. At the, was it Guru Prasad?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. There were lines of people out on the street coming in to meet Baba. And this Indian soldier came in, and he went up to Baba, and he had a lei to put on him, what do you call it there?
Garland.
And he put it on Baba, and Baba was distracted, looked the other way. And he got very upset that Baba didn't pay any attention to him, so he left. And I noticed about an hour later, he must have gone all the way to the end of the line, came back in again, and Baba was distracted again, and never talked to this man. I thought, these things that happen, and you see them, and you wonder what happened and what was going on.
What's the internal?
What was the problem that Baba wouldn't pay attention to this man? So.
Well, what was it like for you when you went to India?
What was it like for me? By then I was like I was his kid. I was one of his children. And I was just very happy to be with him.
And you were sick, and Gustaji helped you.
Oh, I was sick from, I think it was exhaustion again. Getting ready in the plane flight and 17 hours of flight, and then stopping in Bombay, and then getting on a train, and the whole thing getting there. And I was really exhausted. And when I finally got up to see Baba, he said, "How are you?" He heard that I'd been sick. And I said, "It's interesting, Baba, but when I was over there to come up on the stage, I felt so sick. Now that I'm here, I feel fine." And then after I left, I felt sick again. and I told him that, and he laughed. He always laughed at almost everything I said. Yes, he did. He laughed at us a lot.
Chuckle, chuckle, chuckle. Between the two of us, there might be half a brain.
But prior to Baba, I took myself very seriously. I was a very, very serious person. And heavy. And
not fat, heavy. Not fat. You were never fat.
No, heavy.
Not heavy.
Heavy is serious. So.
Fat with a PH.
PH, yes.
Anything else? Any other questions?
He was extraordinary to be with. It was just magic every split second.
We also, while we were in India, Ann Conlon was there too, and they were supposed to. The monsoon season was not upon us, but anyway, a terrible thunderstorm came along, and it poured rain, and the tarp was flapping, and some of the Indian people came rushing forward, and we thought they were going to run up and kill Baba, and Mandali had to stop them. But there was so much water came down that I saw Jane Haynes' pocketbook float by. And they took us all Western women took us into one of the other rooms, and they put all kinds of dry clothing on us. They had Mani's clothing and Meher's clothing and some of the other ones, and it was all men's clothing, So I thought something very strange is going on here.
They always had extra clothing. Trunks of extra clothing.
Yeah, they opened up trunks and clothing would come out.
Whenever you went to, Merazad and Mehrabad, there was always clothing floating around. It was really strange.
Like Goodwill or something.
Yeah, and years they saved everything. I wonder what it was like to have lived with him in India.
Oh, I don't know. Or they could have taken it.
So nice, man.
That's right. Very scary.
Many, many lifetimes.
Yeah, it can be very scary if you have any sense at all. For a few moments you realize this is the abyss. Because when he said you can have realization, it had taken so much time to lead up to it that your first thought is, who is this person? It's not me, the me I live in. It's not my ego that has realization. So there is this huge, huge abyss. Who gets, what is this?
He also said that when you die, if you take his name, you don't experience anything. You no longer are conscious of the universe or the world or anything, or the planes or anything. It's just eternal bliss and joy, and everybody went, eh. Just eternal bliss and joy.
Who is this? Who is it that experiences it? It almost takes you too far. It's a quantum leap.
But I feel like the only reason I was born this lifetime was to meet him.
Oh, absolutely.
It was incredible.
Absolutely.
Just incredible. Everything led up to it, and No other questions?
Yeah, I would like to know a little bit more about what you experienced when you left the barn. You spoke about that moment when in the barn there was all this, it was very funny and comedy.
Yes.
And then you left the barn and got very serious.
Yes. Was that when the Frenchmen were there? The French dancer? And
Oh yeah, Jean.
Jean
Yeah.
and was it Anita who said, Baba, something was happening with the French at the time?
That was an earlier time.
That was an earlier time?
Not that day when Baba did his
Okay.
universal work. That was
Okay.
another time. Anita was talking about General de Gaulle and talking about France and all, and went on. And there was another time when Harold Rudd went on with the Light of India. This was, Baba was sitting, and we had just gotten there, and we were all together, and Harold started reciting the Light of India, which was 4 million stanzas going on, and Baba would raise his eyebrows, but he absolutely let him go through the whole thing, and I thought, my God.
His patience.
The moments, though, and to see him. There were times when I was really so jealous of the dancers. He would call them in, and you'd hear the loudest laughter from the lagoon cabin. The jokes they told him, they really lightened his load. They really did. He loved to hear from them.
From who? From
The dancers.
only?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'd sit out there left out, and all this laughing would go on, and telling him jokes and having fun.
Oh, we had Miss Crash.
They
Don't forget
jokes.
that.
Oh, yes.
No, the women, the female dancers were with you too. All the
Sure.
dancers, yeah.
Oh,
So they
sure.
all told jokes and they laughed and
Viola and Bunty and
yeah,
And on and on.
and Marie and
Skipper.
Skipper. Oh,
Deborah
yes.
was there.
yeah.
yeah,
Viola.
Viola.
And Marie. And what was her? Cynthia, little Cynthia.
Bunty?
I don't
Vanished
Yeah.
into thin air someplace. There, and Bunty. There were several women.
Mhm. I remember Kitty feeding us. I remember Kitty feeding us. We
At
would
the-
go
at-
line up at the door of
The
the
old
original
the
kitchen.
original kitchen.
They brought food out. We didn't even remember. What we were amazed at was we were not aware of the bed. You know how when you go to bed, you know if the pillow's soft or not? You could put us on concrete. And we just didn't give us any food. That's why the day we were released and went to a restaurant, we were just so amazed that you could get in touch with your feelings and your taste buds, because the rest of the time you was somewhere, I don't know where.
I remembered that I was in the lagoon, not the lagoon cabin, what's the little one? The Lantern. I stayed in the Lantern. They moved me out of the motel into the Lantern for some reason or other. I'm a privileged person of some kind.
You were a troublemaker.
And
You're about to be God realized.
yes.
She's reading.
But one of my roommates was BBB. I don't know if any of you know BBB. She's an artist who's done some beautiful paintings of Baba. And Adele, who was supposed to be in charge of BBB. And BBB was very rebellious. But one day, it was late, and BBB wasn't back yet. And BBB came in, it was after dark and everything. And she came over to my bed and she said, "I've been out in the woods. I've been out with little blue people." And I thought, And then she proceeded to sing me a song that the little blue people had sung to her. And she says, "There are little blue people that live at the center in Myrtle Beach." Well, I never saw them, but anyway, I guess BBB had, she, BBB, she was a teenager,
14,
a
15
teenager.
at the time.
But I'll never forget, it was quite an experience, and she didn't go to Adele, she came to me to tell me about it. But there were all kinds of magical, mysterious things going on all the time.
When you were there, it still continues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the floor shines.
You know that what Ed mentioned. Do you remember that we had come back from the barn? The boys carried him. That's when we saw him go into that
State. Yeah.
Everybody had left the barn. And
Yes.
I remember, unfortunately, I was in back. I was on right rear, you know, and we were stationed. And Baba started to sit down. He turned around and started to sit down, and he stopped. And the whole world changed, literally.
Yes.
I mean, it became very, very straight, ominous.
It was.
There was something about it. I don't know why. But I saw him, and he sat down, and I saw him from the back, and he was in this, and Erich was amazing, because I saw Erich, and it was like he was etched in black. And I don't know, I never saw Baba make any gesture, really. But Erich went and got the water pitcher, and Baba put his hand and he threw water on his own feet. And like that.
I forgot.
I didn't see
Very, nobody saw
No, that
it.
was in the
Only
barn.
That was in the barn with
Oh.
just
Before you
that's it.
carried him out.
You were waiting for him
We were
to
waiting
come out.
outside, and that's when they put him down. You
He
put
sat
him
outside the
down.
barn,
And
too.
then
Yeah.
Erich said, lift him, and we started to lift him. He said, put him down. And all the time, Baba was in this,
State.
I don't know. I never saw him in, you know, I didn't see him that much. But I never saw him in any way like he was that day. Did you?
No. No.
That was just very, and then when we finally got him out and had to put him down again and so forth, how many times. And then everybody felt it.
Oh,
You
we
know,
all sat
you
looking at
could
him.
feel- yeah. And then we took him down to the, they drove him down to the lagoon cabin. And he was sitting in front.
On the
In
road.
those days, there was nothing there. You know, it's all shrubbery now.
Yes.
But it was rather barren. And I'll never forget the mandali. Do you remember? They were like
A phalanx.
wall.
Thing.
They formed a circle with their backs to Baba, and they just stood there. And when that woman
Came out.
came out and rah,
Yeah.
and went you berserk, boy, they shoved her like it was not gentle. You know, nobody could have broken through them. I don't think a patent tank could have gotten past those men.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And Baba was just sitting there, and he just sat there, and he didn't. I don't remember his moving or anything. He just sat there. But there was something very, very dark about it. I mean, to me. Did you feel that?
If I allowed myself, I could have been scared, but what I did was put it in a framework of what I knew in life, and you know, I just kept it very small.
I accepted it.
I had to accept it, but I had no explanation for it outside of the conventional learning, whether it was psychology or, you know, there was just nothing, no category to put it in. It was so unique.
It was unique.
It was unique.
Literally
Yeah.
unique.
I just felt like he wasn't there. There was a body there, but he was someplace else.
But, yes, but he left something behind.
I'm sure.
He left, you know, I mean, yes, he was gone.
Yeah.
But there was
Inward.
this kind of
There was a
aura.
power, there was a dark
aura
power.
about the whole.
There was a
Yes,
terrible power there.
Terrible power.
Because he was so sensitive to us at all times and so loving, and this time that wasn't there.
Oh no.
It was, how can I
That was
put
on
it?
another- literally another
It was
planet.
somewhere
I
else.
felt really left behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we were left behind, and
Waiting for
it
the
was,
bus.
there wasn't a disregard for what we felt. It was including us in this kind of thing, but it certainly wasn't sparing us anything.
Do you remember that he asked us in the barn if whatever was going to happen in the world, whether we wanted to share it with him equally, whether he wanted him to take the whole burden, or did he want to give it all to us? And we volunteered. We said, we will share it with you, Baba, all three, the people and Baba.
Yeah, there were times when you realized you were volunteering for something big.
Well,
When it was not a
do you
swift thing
remember,
to
how
do.
did you feel? I didn't feel terribly happy about it.
No?
But I felt it was something that
Something big.
you couldn't possibly have said anything else.
No.
I mean, that's not what I really wanted to do,
No.
I don't think.
And I couldn't comprehend what it was going to be,
No,
or
exactly. But,
And then there
funny.
was this idiot's idea that I'm strong, I can do it. You know, there's almost this element in yourself that when you're asked to share something like that, oh yes, I can do it, without
Oh, I
even
would feel
thinking
that
it through.
way.
I don't think I thought anything through. I'm just gonna go right ahead, full speed ahead.
Papa, we're strong.
Yeah. Oh, well.
I can't remember. Do you remember anything else from 62 in India?
what?
In India, you were there, didn't you?
Yeah?
62. Do you remember anything else that happened then,
Um,
besides the rains and?
Well, that day was such a, oh, how can you describe that day? First of all, you remember it was sunny as all, and those bedspreads, those Indian bedspreads, you said tarp, it was Indian bedspread.
Yes.
That was the tent, just to sort of keep the
sun
sun
off.
off. But suddenly it just turned black,
Yes.
bang.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a rain like that. It
It's
was like being
underwater, you're
poured from
underwater.
a bucket.
Yeah.
It's
And of
not
course it
rain.
went through those Indian bedspreads.
Sure.
You were all beautiful. We all saw you with your hair, and the mascara running. I mean, in 2 seconds.
Yes.
And the
literally
pocketbook's floating.
Yeah.
ankle deep in mud
Yeah.
in 1 minute.
Yeah. Yes, and the pocketbook, Jane Haynes' pocketbook floating by.
I know, those were moments to treasure.
But that's really what I remember.
It was also more impersonal.
And then the
It was
gyp,
totally
It was so
impersonal.
impersonal.
but also the gypsies had come to see Baba, and
Oh, they were
had
wonderful.
they had walked for hundreds of miles to get there to see him.
They were the most spectacular looking
They're-
people.
they're-
They were very, very dark.
Yes, and their
And
clothing.
they wore that vivid red
Yes.
with the little mirrors embroidered in it.
Yes.
And the babies, I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
They were,
Wasn't the Cuban crisis about the same time when we
Yes.
were going
oh,
over?
yeah.
Yeah, and we
Sure
thought,
was.
I expected,
And the Chinese border war.
yes, and Baba talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Baba said, how can I take sides? People were saying, oh, the Chinese are doing this, they're doing that, and Baba said, how can I take sides?
But also remember the reporter came in and Baba allowed
That I
him on
remember.
and I don't know what the reporter asked him, but I know that Baba's response was that India will be all right because I am here.
Now what? What will happen?
I was just thinking the same thing.
Now what? What has he got in store?
Look at the world today.
Oh,
When he said about 75% of the world being destroyed, it was Fred Winterfeld who was shocked. And then Baba had said, it's in my language, not yours. And I had the feeling it would have more to do with our impressions. Rather, it doesn't have to be the gross world. How much of that can you keep destroying? But people have to change. They have to turn around and see life differently and see each other differently.
maybe 75% of the stupidity will go.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
The impressions, the sanskaras, the
Val's favorite subject, the unnatural sense.
unnatural.
Non-natural. Non-natural. There's no such thing as unnatural. Read the discourse.
Non-natural.
Yes.
Non-natural, not unnatural.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you wonder what the more primitive sanskaras, like tribalism and identity, which is so limited with your form or with a group, with a nation.
Territoriality.
Territory, yeah.
It's reptilian.
Yep.
War.
Yep.
Greed.
Lust is the last to go. I'm kidding. We're getting deliriously tired.
The first, well, the first experience I had that made me interested in the spiritual life was I was an atheist. I couldn't believe in a God that was up there somewhere. And when I went down and saw Keisha and Henry, they had been reading different things, and they showed me some of the materials. And it was just like something snapped again. And that's when I turned around and I saw God is not someplace else. We are God. And we're unconscious of that divinity. And that's what life is for, to realize this. And that was such a step. And for people to realize that God is not someplace else, but God is everything and everybody, that's what makes the difference. You don't go out and kill people. I can't even step on the bug without thinking, okay, bug, God bless you.
Okay, bug.
Where did you go to college?
William and Mary.
William
and Mary. Back in the dark ages.
Oh, it's so dark.
Well, folks.
Thank you.
This was nice.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Did we talk enough? I can't think of anything else. I'm sure there's some more stories stored in there somewhere, in the dark recesses.
Come back again. You'll remember them when you go home.
Or forget some
It'll
more.
probably be a 5-minute one. You don't want us back for just 5 minutes.
Where do you both live now?
About a mile apart from each other. Up in
Armonk.
Westchester, Armonk, New York.
Near Clinton. Near Clinton.
Yes.
Near Clinton, about 5 miles from Clinton.
We'll find the chap. You told me you think he's read some of Baba's stuff. I know Charles Haynes has met with him on First Amendment things.
According to this letter, that an Indian Bible lover woman from Pune wrote to Erich that she had written to Clinton, and he called her from the White House.
Yeah.
Okay.
And said he had read a lot of Mayor Baba and he vacationed each year at Hilton Head, he told her, which is near Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
So he knew about the center.
Did Al Gore also have some kind of...
Yeah, he had a connection in college with, and I forget his name, he's a musician. What's his name?
Craig Law.
Yes, thank you, he stayed.
His wife,
Yeah.
No, in the interview the other night when Clinton was on the air, he did mention something about his religious and theosophical studies. Because Larry asked him, he said, "Did you say theosophical?"
Oh, I didn't see the Larry King interview. I saw 3 others. We've always been hoping that world leaders will have this. We'll see. The American ones.
During the campaign, a Bible lover brought up a card to Gore, and he denied knowing anything about him. And I heard that, I said,
Gore's going to lose.
Yeah.
Oh.
Can't do that.
Gore's lawyer works right in Armonk. What was his name? David, I can't think. But he was the lawyer for the election and lost. And there's a Bible woman, a woman who's been with the Florida group, who works for that attorney. It didn't work. I think people have to objectify. They have to see, and through experience. Most people can't read. Most people have not been reading. They can't extrapolate. They haven't got historical background. If they haven't learned from experience, been there, done it, they can't imagine how bad things could get.
When you're born in the Depression like we were, you know how bad things can get.
World War II. Yeah.
World War II.
Anyway.
We
Do
were
we say
teenagers.
something at the end? And
It's up to you.
a moment's silence and say Jai Baba. folks.
J. Baba.
J. Baba.
Which one?
I saw Alexander Me neither, because I don't think I can get over this visit. I've been to Florida about 8 years, and I'm just hoping that Bob will turn something around so that I can go there for at least a week. It's got a 3-bedroom apartment in Florence. I can't stay. I might go see her.
Is there a trial?
Not yet.
In 62, where did you stay? This one.
Oh, we did.
No, it was a week ago.
We stayed in one, it was called, and it was a club with a polo ground. That was for the British Army. And they were made up of and
Money's
we
more important than
were not
animals.
as a church club with even higher. Yeah, and we had Easter, and like I stayed with Donald and Peter.